Hello, my fair friends. I'm Ruby Ruse. This is Baby Bunny, and welcome to Fairy Fortunes. On today's show, I would like to share with you my thoughts of this book. This is called The Goatman by J. Nathan Couch, which was published in 2014. Now, I picked up this book because I was very curious about a phenomenon that was occurring in Wisconsin called where they have actually seen a goatman-like creature there. So as I was doing some research to try and find some literature on that being, I came across J. Nathan Couch's book, and it really was one of the only books that I found on this particular subject. So I wanted to tell you some of the things that I liked and maybe a few things that I didn't like about this particular work. One thing that I can tell you is that this is a very fascinating, very easy to read book. Mr. Couch really strives to make a very factual presentation. He even spent some time addressing some stories of similar goatmen that came out as hoaxes. So he really presents this argument from he really presents an argument that he is just trying to relay to you factual information, things that people have experienced and seen, and has done a great wealth of research on this subject. He also offers a very plausible and mundane explanation for this goatman phenomenon, which is very interesting and actually makes a lot of sense. And I also like that he really is very careful to explain where he collected his research, and that theme runs throughout the book. Each chapter usually has some mention of where he collected the research on the particular subject that he's writing about in that particular chapter. He also speculates as to why the Goatman and some other legends may have been, that he speculates that maybe these were just simply cautionary tales to keep young children at home safe. But he also makes it clear in this work that there is such a large body of modern folklore and urban legends and witnesses who came forth to talk about their experiences with these goatman-like beings, despite the ridicule that they faced for doing that. And he explains that he finds that very difficult to discredit. And I should make mention of the fact that J. Nathan Couch is actually a paranormal investigator in West End, Wisconsin. So he is very open-minded. He is very willing to entertain that there may not be a scientific explanation for these creatures. But he is also on a mission to see if he can debunk that as well. So I really enjoyed that he had that open presentation. And as I said, it's a very easy read. He writes in a very compelling style that makes you want to keep reading. You will, if you choose to pick up a copy of this work, you will find that you will read it very, very quickly. It's very easy to follow, very enjoyable experience to read this book. Another thing that he does in this work that I really enjoyed is that he makes some connections to other beings in folklore. So he does, this book mostly focuses on a goatman phenomenon, a creature that is half goat and half man. But he also speculates about the Bigfoot phenomenon and how that may or may not be connected to the goatman stories. So he also makes possible correlations to other folklore urban legends too. So he speculates that perhaps the Hookman legend and the legend of the Goatman may have the same source, and it may be of that cautionary tale nature. So he also speculates that the Goatman bears a striking resemblance to the description of satyrs, and he goes on to explain some of the abilities of satyrs. For example, the god Pan, who is also a satyr, has the ability to strike fear into anyone who angers him or interrupts him or displeasures him. And in fact, there is some speculation that the word panic comes from the name of the god Pan, because it is that inducing of fear that Pan was known to do. So he also makes mention of some other folklore creatures that have similar characteristics to these modern-day goatmen and the ancient Greek satyrs. For example, he mentions a creature called a devi that was purported to have an animal-like bottom half with a tail and horns on their head. And he also mentions a Native American shape-shifting creature called an oki, which bears a striking resemblance not only to the Goatman, but also bears a resemblance to the Irish character from folklore, the puka, which I often talk about on Fairy Fortunes, because the puka is featured on one of my Fairy Fortune cards. So I really enjoyed that he put together such an interesting collection of research and stories. He also goes in, not only is this book about Wisconsin, but he mentions goatmen that occur in Missouri. Maryland has a very famous goatman phenomenon. Texas is another chapter in this book. Also California, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Indiana, Michigan, and even Arizona has goatmen creatures, and he mentions some of those creatures in this work. And it's just a fascinating read as to it, and I really consider this a really great source of modern folklore. So to be honest, I really don't have a lot of negative things to say about this book. I would have to say that if you are interested in folklore, if you are interested in Fortean and paranormal literature, I definitely think that you would enjoy this book. It's such an easy read. It would definitely be an excellent addition to a paranormal collection of books. It also has a very interesting media guide that I had not seen before and some other things. So not only does he give you resources where he found some of his research, but he also gives you some fictional books that you would find interesting and would describe a creature like the Goatman and some of these other beings mentioned. And he also provides some film work that is very intriguing. So for instance, it was from this book that I started watching Monsters and Mysteries in America, which is a show that was done by Destination America, and you can find it and purchase it on YouTube. So if you're interested in learning more about some of these phenomenon that he's talking about in this book, I would highly recommend that show. But you can find some other resources like that in his book. So I really attribute him to giving me direction to other avenues of modern day folklore that I really found enjoyable and interesting. So I really don't have a lot of negative things to say about this work. I think the only criticism, and it's really not a criticism, it's just a personal want, if you will. It's not even really an opinion. There really are not a lot of eyewitness accounts. I really would have loved to have seen Mr. Couch interview some of these witnesses that he talks about and use some of their own words in a work like this. So that really isn't featured in this book, and I really kind of miss that. I would have liked to have heard what actual eyewitnesses had to say about their encounters. There is a little bit about this in this book, but there's really no excerpt of an interview that he conducted himself with a witness to a Goatman incident. So that was really the only thing that I didn't like. The other thing is that at first I picked up this book because I really wanted to learn about the Wisconsin Goatmen, because I was actually, as many of you know, I was in Wisconsin for Rogues and Ruffians in Baraboo, Wisconsin. So I was very curious about any fairy creatures that I might encounter while I was camping in the Wisconsin area. And so I actually picked up this book because I wanted to know about the Wisconsin Goatmen specifically. And at first I was a little bit disappointed that there were only just a few chapters devoted to that, and then he moves on to other beings in other states. So it would have been great to have a little bit more on that particular Goatman, but I understand why he created this particular work that talks about other beings in other states, because I think one of the purposes of this book was that he was really trying to present that the Goatman is not a phenomena that just occurs in Wisconsin, that this is a phenomenon that occurs throughout the United States, which does actually make it that much harder to discount these witnesses that have come forward and have purported to see beings like this, because there are so many other people from around the country that have had similar experiences. So while I would have liked more information on the Wisconsin Goatman, as I continued to read the book, I really appreciated why it was structured the way it was, and that it showcases other beings in Texas and in Maryland, because he was really trying to articulate that this is not an isolated incident. So those are my thoughts about The Goatman, written by J. Nathan Couch. So he does have a blog, I believe, so I will leave a link to his work down below in the description box, so I do hope that you will check that out. And I would really be curious to know that if you yourself have witnessed some kind of supernatural being, or particularly a Goatman, if you will share your experiences with Bunny and I in the comments below, we would really appreciate it. We find this phenomenon exceptionally fascinating, and we would definitely like to know more. Just so you know, I am of the mindset that folklore is not a dead phenomenon, that folklore is still a very active part of our experience of life. And I think that there are beings and incidences out there that go beyond science. And with that, have a fairyful day.